Somebody give God some praise. Listen, before I give my altar call, I want to talk to married couples for just a minute. I'm going to use Ted and Hannah for just a minute. Leave two of those chairs. Ted and Hannah, come here and sit with me if you want to. Listen, I'm going to use them for just a minute. Listen. What were you called to be? Instigators of love. But wait a minute, doesn't the Bible say, husbands, love your wives even as Christ loved the church? Was it the church that first reached out toward Jesus, or was it Jesus that first reached out toward the church? Oh, who is Jesus in this relationship? Ted or Hannah? Ted is. You know what that means, husbands? You're under obligation to fix it. You got to take the initiative. You got to do whatever it takes to sustain your marriage, to protect your marriage, to keep your marriage. You don't get to sit in the bedroom with your arms folded waiting for her to come to you. No, you are the appointed leader, and the leader has to take the first action. Oh yeah, you're the king of your castle, but the king is required to maintain peace in his kingdom. Oh, you the head honcho, but that means you got to fix whatever's broken underneath you. You got to take the initiative. The reason divorce is so high in the church is because we got husbands that want power with no responsibility. It don't work like that. If you got power, you got responsibility. Yeah, I'm going to ride you hard for a minute, husbands. I'm going to ride you real hard because the buck stops with you. The buck stops with you. I know you've been sitting on your throne with your sepulcher, but you need to get off your rooty tooty stinky booty and do something in your house. You don't just give the kids for her to raise. You instruct them, you teach them, you lead them, you guide them. You are responsible for your kingdom. You answer for everything that comes in the door. Don't put it off your wife. Well, they asked mom. No, it ain't good enough. You are in power, therefore you are ultimately responsible. You want to give it back to her now, don't you? You be head of the household. Listen, stand up here. Jesus said for the husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church. Listen, you know what Jesus did? He's the leader, ain't he? He's a leader, ain't he? Jesus is the leader, head above all, all powerful, almighty. You know what Jesus did when his relationship with the church was in trouble? The leader became the lamb and sacrificed himself. Oh, I ain't finished yet. The leader became the lamb and sacrificed himself to save or rescue a relationship that was in danger of being destroyed. So when you're on the verge of divorce, husbands, you gotta die. Stand up. Listen, the Bible says when you are married, two become one, right? Two become one flesh. Okay? Ted occupies a certain amount of space. He occupies a certain amount of space. How can two occupy the space of one? Two become one when you are married. How can two occupy the space of one? That means part of him has to die. Part of her has to die. You have to lay off pride and arrogance and selfishness. You got to lay off what you have to have and what you want and what your will is. The only way that two can occupy the space of one is if part of him dies and part of her dies. And for the betterment of the union, they lay off their own selfish desires so that they can live peaceably together with one another. You can go sit down now. You sit down right here. Don't sit down there yet. I ain't talked to the women yet, Hannah. I ain't talked to the women yet. Because I got something to say to the women too. Listen, our society has tried to compensate the suffering of women by telling the women they don't need a man. And I know that in recent years women were put down and women were degraded, but we have allowed the pendulum to swing all the way to the other side, and our society tells you that you don't need a man. Listen, wives, you got to get off your power trip and let your husband drive the car. When God was issuing license to drive a marriage, He didn't give it to you. He gave it to your husband. I'm not saying that you are inferior to him. What I'm saying is you have different roles to play within the household. If me and Carrie are fighting over control of the steering wheel, everybody in the car is going to die. This is why your kids don't respect you, because you don't respect each other. This is why your kids play you one against the other, because you don't respect each other. We got to fall in line in our household. You will be a better household if you support him in his role. If you allow him to lead, everything in your house will run smoother. Everything in your house will run smoother. But that means you can't be in control of everything. You can't be in control of everything. You can't have your fingerprints on everything. You can't whip him like a puppy and tell him where to go and when to go there. That's why the dynamics of our house are all offset. Our children don't know who's in charge or who's leading. They see you devouring each other, and they grow up to live in a mindset that that's what you do with people you love. You devour one another.